Hello, everyone, and welcome to Teachers Connections in Service on Learning Challenges. I'm Stephanie Rose, and I'm joined today with Judy, Sheila, and Lisa. We're going to talk all about learning challenges, but I'm going to let these ladies introduce themselves. Judy, welcome.
Thanks, Stephanie. It's good to be here. I am a retired homeschooling mom of 3 children who did Sunlight all the way through to graduation, and they're now all grown. And we have a second generation of Sunlighters in our family using Sunlight. So we're excited about that. I also work for Sunlight full-time as their marketing sales coordinator. And so I get to work every convention season with Lisa and Sheila and a bunch of other really great ladies, except for this year. And so hopefully we're going to be able to see you all on the convention floor again next year. But it's one of the best parts of my job.
Thank you, Judy. And Sheila, welcome.
Hey, Stephanie. So I'm also a retired homeschool mom of 3 kids. One is working from home and the other one is also graduated from college and working down in Gainesville. And then my daughter is in nursing school this year. So they have launched pretty much. But I do work at homeschool conventions with a bunch of great ladies. And so I hope to see you soon next year.
Thank you, Sheila. And Lisa, welcome.
I am not a retired homeschool mom. This is actually my last year, though. That's right. My baby of 3 is a senior this year. And so we are almost finished. We've used Sunlight from the beginning. And I, too, have sadly missed seeing all of you at conventions. It truly is one of the favorite things that I do every year. So I am praying with you that we get to be out next summer.
We can all pray for that. I'm so happy that the 3 of you have joined me. I will say Sheila and Lisa are also mentors in the group, so you'll hear their advice if you leave a question. Sometimes they're the ones answering. Judy and I pop in when we can. We've got a lot of other Sunlight things going on, but we can provide advice as well. So hopefully you've seen us all on the group, and we will get started. So let's define what learning challenges are. Judy, you want to start?
Sure. So I think there are some learning challenges that are very well known. I think most people would recognize terminology like ADD or ADHD or being on the spectrum or autism. I think there are other kinds of learning challenges too. I think you can be just as challenged if your child is advanced for their age or grade level. It can be a challenge to find sufficient reading material for a child who is a voracious reader. And so I think we have those kind of challenges as well. There are students who have physical challenges that affect their academics. We had, one of our children had physical issues that had to do with fine motor skills and with walking. So I think, all of those could be defined as learning challenges. And there are kids who just struggle. I mean, we all had children who struggled in one subject or another. And I was talking with another homeschool mom earlier today, and she was talking about a variety of things that impact learning and create challenges. Hormones, big impact on learning, and certainly can create challenges in our homeschool. Kids who don't get sufficient rest or sleep or miss a nap or get to bed late at night. There are just so many things. Disruptions in your household. Maybe you have an elderly family member living with you. All of those things can create, I think, challenges to learning.
Absolutely. Sheila said right before we started, if they don't eat on time, I mean, it could be as simple as that. There are environmental challenges as well as medical challenges, as well as, personality challenges. There's all different kinds of challenges. So I just wanted to make sure that we laid that groundwork before we went and dove into this, because I think a lot of people are thinking, you know, dyslexia, ADD, ADHD, physical challenges, but there's also these other things. Make sure they get food, make sure they get exercise, make sure they get enough sleep. If you have if you have a hiccup in your life, you have a death in the family, or someone is sick, that is going to cause issue. Give them grace, give yourself grace, and that's like high level, you know, as much as you can, as much as you can think about learning challenges. It could be anything. So what are the best ways to work through any learning challenge? What's the best advice? Any stories you have? What do you got?
I would say the first thing that you need to do is really try to identify, is it physical? Is it emotional? Is it fill in the blank? Because until you know what you're dealing with, you can't fix something. So I think the first thing is to acknowledge that there's a problem and do your best to identify what that problem is so that you can deal with it.
I think one of the best things about homeschooling is that you really get to know your child. When your child goes to school and they bring home a bad grade or they didn't do well on a test, you don't really know what caused that. Is it a learning challenge, or is it that they didn't study the material, they didn't get enough sleep last night, they're tired, they're distracted, their phone was gone, you know, what was it that caused that poor score? So when you have your child at home, you are working one-on-one with them and you are seeing, oh, they really do know their math facts, but maybe they were distracted when they were taking their test. Or, oh, wow, my child really doesn't know their math facts. Like when I ask them, when I quiz them, they're not coming fast. So that's one of the benefits about homeschooling, is that you really get to have a pulse on what their strengths and their weaknesses are, and then you can do something about it. Because if you don't know, then you can't, like Lisa was saying, you don't know where to start. When we first started homeschooling, I mean, you know, kindergarten, can't mess up kindergarten too poorly. And so we were baby stepping our way. By the time we hit like first and second grade, when my child should have been starting to read, and he was struggling and he was reversing letters. And in our state, Lisa and I live in the same state, and we would do a portfolio evaluation as part of our fulfillment for homeschooling. And the woman that I used is a teacher at a public school. She had homeschooled, but she was also a teacher, and she taught special ed kids. So I would ask her, like, you know, my son is writing D's and B's. I mean, he can't get those things straight. And she was like, oh no, that's common for this age. Don't worry. Okay, I will just keep plugging away. And it wasn't until third grade that she was like, maybe you want to get that checked out, you know. So it's good to hold things loosely. It could just be that they are young for their age, that they need to do a little maturing. I did read a good book. It's very old now. It's probably not in print, but it's called Better Late Than Early, and it was about teaching your kids, and it's better that they learn things late than early. That was the whole point of the book. So having had read that book, it kind of gave me some peace of mind that we're just going to keep plugging away and it's okay. But then when we hit that roadblock at the age where he really should have been reading chapter books and he wasn't, then we decided to pursue some testing and find out. So don't, in your first week of homeschooling, think my child can't read, or, you know, my child is stupid, or whatever, you know, like, it's okay. You are figuring out where your child is, what's his baseline. You know, I'm at the age where I'm doing a lot of baseline testing for the future. So what's his baseline? And then you can have an idea of, is there progress? Are you seeing progress? If there is progress, then you're probably fine. If there is not progress, okay, now what should I look into? Maybe you need to discuss it with your pediatrician, maybe in conversation with other moms who have already been there, done that, have had some sort of diagnosis. They can give you some direction. That's what happened to me. I had a neighbor who was like, oh, you should do this and that. I'm like, okay, great. So yeah, all that to say, you're starting out, don't panic. But if you're already aware of the challenges, then you know that you have something to work on.
Not to the exclusion of those areas where there are challenges, but it's also helpful to look for areas where your student excels. Look for those areas of strength and focus on them, and help develop them and encourage them, because success is huge for developing self-confidence in a student. So absolutely, we're investing time in the areas and resources in the areas where there is a struggle, but we also need to make sure to balance that with spending time and energy and resources in those areas where a child really excels. And I think one of the most important things someone said to me when we had a child with a physical challenge diagnosis was, just remember that diagnosis is not who your child is. That diagnosis does not define your child. Keep in mind that your child is a many-faceted, unique individual, and this is just one part.
Absolutely. I have a child who has ADHD, and it took, like you, Sheila, it took, I think, 4 years before I mean, we would talk to the doctor, we would talk to the people, we would, all the people in his life, and it took a long time. And even now, my hope is I can always provide him tools on how to focus himself step by step. So we're always concentrating on that, but it does take a while, and sometimes you have to get your physician involved. But I really do think that what Judy said about building up their strengths, it helps also with their self-esteem. If you can really focus on their strengths with things, and boy, that does help him.
Yeah, because
Like
I mean,
special.
I remember, when he was around other children who read better than he did, I mean, he was like, "What's wrong with me? I'm stupid," and I'm like, "You're not stupid." We would have these little pep talks and stuff. And he is very strong in math. He's a finance, he's working for Fidelity. I mean, he's really good, so I mean, so, okay, you're not going to be a librarian or, whatever. So, I mean, you have other strengths. And nowadays, I mean, he reads YouTube, like he YouTubes everything. So he's not a reader, which of course breaks my heart because I am. But he is a learner. He is definitely a learner. He is constantly learning. He is, he is inquisitive. And that was my goal, just because he doesn't read fiction like I do, it's fine. But the other caution that I want to give you too is that you might feel like you're a bad teacher, because I was like, okay, I'm ruining my child. Like, I can't teach him to read. It's me. It's my fault. It's what am I doing wrong? So that's my other caution. Don't think that you're the fault. You're what's the common denominator here? It's me. It must be me. So don't take it to heart, but also don't be like, oh well, it's his problem. It's a balance. You have to figure out when to get involved, what to do when, how to get involved. Do you need outside help? Do you need to hire a tutor or get therapy? What is involved? What do you have? I have a friend whose son is autistic, and they did a lot of therapy, and he was like nonverbal, and now he is, but it was a ton of work, and it's expensive. Like, I'm not saying that, everyone can afford it, but she did the research, she did everything she could to help her child succeed. And he only homeschooled for a few years, but she after school, she did so many other things to be able to help her child, but she knew that she was going to need extra help. And so don't be afraid to look for, help outside of your skills, but also don't beat yourself up when your child is not learning at the rate that you think they should be.
And if you're looking specifically for assistance with learning challenges in homeschooling, a lot of state homeschool organizations can connect you with the people or the resources that you need. So that's another good direction to head when you're trying to find answers.
And just because you are a homeschooler, sometimes in our state, I know you are eligible for some help from the state, even though you're not a public school student. And especially earlier on than later on, I think they are able to intervene sooner.
Right.
And I think you can find that out from your homeschool state organization. I think they can help you connect there.
Yeah, and also network. I mean, that's what I did. I just talked it up with all my mommy friends. You know, does your child do this? Does your child do that? I mean, not in a comparison like, oh, my child's better or your child's better, but like, I wanted to know, was it something I was doing? Was it that my child was being disobedient? Like, I'm like, you've already covered this. How are you not getting, you know? So when I would talk to other moms and they would be like, oh yeah, I had a child who did that and this is what we did and this is how we got through it. Like asking other people is going to be a great way for you to find out what resources you have locally in your state, in your county, in your school district or whatever. What doctors will work with you and which won't. What therapists are good and which aren't, you know, like just like anything. We're about to do a kitchen remodel and I'm asking everyone, what appliances do you have and who do you use for flooring? And, you know, so use your network, use your homeschool group right here to ask, and other people who have been there, done that will share what has worked for them, what hasn't worked for them. And just because it didn't work for them doesn't mean it won't work for your child and vice versa. So. Yeah.
Absolutely. So if you have a child with a subject that they might be a little bit weaker in, how do you build up those weaker subjects? How do you help them?
I think a lot of that comes from your attitude. As the mom, we know we set the tone for our home and we set the tone for our homeschool. And I don't think there's anything wrong with acknowledging that, yes, I know this is hard for you, and I know it requires all of your brain cells and that you don't love it, or whatever the case is. But I also know that we together as a team can work through this. Now, we might not work at the same speed as your brother or sister who finishes a math book in 1 year or reads 42 novels before breakfast. But together as a team, we will make progress. And I think progress is the magic word. We're not in a race with anyone. We're not comparing to anyone. We are only trying to be better today than we were yesterday.
If you brought, I was going to say, if you brought children home from a public school, that is definitely something they're used to. They were in a class of 30, and now they're in a class of 1 or maybe 4, or however many children you have. So it's definitely different, and you can sort of massage that whole emotion right out of them. There's no reason to feel less than.
Yeah.
Judy, I'm sorry, I interrupted.
No, not a problem. I was just going to kind of build on what Lisa was saying and say that comparison is going to be your biggest enemy. And it really has no place in your homeschool. So show it the door.
Yes. Well, I often tell my children and moms and children that I meet at conventions, dads, whoever, God is not a mistake maker. He did not make your child the way that they are and go, I wish I had added a love of math or a love of reading or whatever. Nor did he say, I should have put that child in Stephanie's family instead of Lisa's family. He sees so much more than we do, and he did all the things right. And sometimes I think it's our lack of reliance on him that causes us to struggle. And so I think I told my children that all the time. You are not here by mistake. this is exactly where you should be right now. And so we're gonna, again, be a team, and we're gonna just work through whatever this issue is to the best of our ability. Won't be perfect, but it will be what it's supposed to be.
And there's all sorts of strategies that you can use. Remember, again, I know I tend to keep harping on the idea that we're not doing school at home. We are homeschooling. So it does not have to look like what school at school looks like, where your child sits at a desk 6 hours a day. So if you do have a child who is wiggly, let him wiggle, let him get the wiggles out. There's another mentor, Jen, and she shares about a child of hers who she would have to exercise for 1 hour before they could sit down and start school. Like, he needed to burn the energy before he could sit still. So I don't know if it was an ADD thing, or just like he just needed to, he had all this energy he needed to burn, and then he could relax. Kind of like a dog, you got to go throw the ball and then they can sleep, you know. So it could be something like that. If you have a child who's really wiggly, then let him move. It's okay. The dyslexic child who eventually did read, he is also ADD, which we didn't find out until he was in college, but it does explain a lot when he was a child. And he would read with a book in front of his face, walking around the house. Like, I read on the couch, he reads walking. And my husband would come home for lunch and going, "What is going on?" I'm like, he's doing his reader. Like, duh. And, you know, you can't do that in school. That's not conventional. But if that's what it took to get him to read, okay, I don't care. Just don't step on the dog when you're walking, you know, and don't step on the Legos you left out because it'll hurt your feet. Ask me how I know. But so it's okay if you want to do things, you know, not conventional. If you need to go outside and jump on the trampoline reciting your math facts, or doing spelling, or doing more hands-on-y kind of things to be able to get your child to focus. I know a lot of those ADD kids need the thinking putty or something to kind of just, they need to move something in order to be able to focus their attention. A lot of moms want to do their read alouds on the couch with their child sitting next to them with their hands folded in their lap, and that doesn't work for 90% of the children. So it's okay if you give them something to keep their hands busy, like a coloring book or Play-Doh, or for little kids, they can string beads or pasta. They can make, you know, penne necklaces, or, I mean, just use what you have. My kids would play with Lincoln logs, and the boys would set up little army men. And then when I was finished with my read aloud, they would shoot the rubber bands and knock down the little army men. But like the whole read aloud time, they would be strategically setting everything up. And you would think that they're not paying attention, but I would stop and I would quiz or ask questions, or, you know, tell me what's going on in the story. Oh, mommy, so-and-so is doing something, and they would just, and I was stunned that they were paying attention at all, but they were. So it doesn't have to look like school for it to be educational. So if you need to let your child do things a little differently, I give you permission. I give you my blessing if that's what you need.
And I think you have to invest some time to figure out what those different things are. And talking with other moms who are further down the homeschool path than you are is a great place to start. And there are strategies that you can use. I had one child who struggled with reading, and the simple use of an index card underneath each line of print as that child moved down a page made a huge difference, because when you took it away, all those letters on the page just wouldn't hold still and they wouldn't stay put. Some kids are distracted by illustrations, so just simply putting your hand over an illustration. Some kids struggle with reading and need a partner. And so maybe you read everything on the left-hand page and they read what's on the right-hand page until they build their confidence in their ability to do that. And the same thing happens with math and with writing struggles. One of my kids had fine motor skill issues and couldn't hold a pencil to save his life, not correctly. And so writing assignments were mind numbing and hair tearing until I figured out there is no law that says he has to write with a pencil. Teach the boy how to type. And when he learned how to type, then his brain was miraculously freed to focus on his imagination, and he could suddenly be creative because he wasn't thinking about, hold the pencil here, tip the paper here, put the, it made a huge difference. But you have to invest the time to figure out what those strategies are for each one of your children.
Absolutely. I say all the time, we get pictures of Sunlighters hanging upside down on the couch reading their readers, or out on a swing on the porch or on the trampoline reading. Also, I personally kick that chair right out of underneath him for table subjects, because I know that he's wiggly, and so he stands up and he does his math and wiggles around, and it works. So it doesn't always have to look like the cover of a Sunlight catalog, although we love it when it does.
Right.
Every homeschool is a little different. So
Yes.
So we talked a little bit about strategies. We talked a little bit about different kinds of strategies. Do we have any multisensory strategies that we can sort of approach here?
I want Lisa to talk about her math games.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I do play a lot of math games. I help other students besides my own. That's how much I love math. We've discussed that before, and there is no cure, so it's okay. So sometimes parents will say, well, every time I looked, you were playing. Yeah, we were. Which one, the kid doesn't know they're learning, so that's a plus. But there are lots of games, physical games you can play. I have drawn a number line on the ground, and you need to run from 3 to add 10. Where do you end up on the line? I had one little boy that loved to just run. So I'm a runner. We would run and we would do math while we were running. Okay, we're going to do our 5s times tables while we're running. And so we would just run along and chat, and what's 5 times 7? And he would say 35, and we'd do 10 more steps, and what's 5 times 10? That's 50. So I think that, again, you can learn lots and lots of ways. I have a young man that comes, and sometimes I'm like, okay, you need to do 12 push-ups before we do the next problem. So he does. Then we come back and we go again. But lots of ways that you can do things along the way without it looking like school.
Yeah, and so for my kids, because of the learning challenges that they had with reading, it somehow, and I don't know what the diagnosis is, like we didn't pursue it, somehow it was related to also writing. Like I can't read, I don't like to write, and I don't know why. It wasn't dysgraphia, but it was pretty close. So, so Copywork was a joy. So we didn't do it every week. Like I was like, okay, or I would cut it in half. When we got to like level 2 and 3 where it was long, I would be like, okay, you just do half of it or 2 sentences or whatever. And I scribed for my kids for a long time until I got tired of it. And then I taught him in 3rd grade to type, just like Judy, because he would give me the minimum amount of words to make sense. So if a sentence is a subject and a verb, that's all I got. I got no descriptors. So once he learned to type, oh my goodness, adjectives and adverbs came into being. Like and so his writing took off. And now the dyslexic child who doesn't like to read is an excellent writer. I'm like, I don't even know how this happened, but it's amazing. And I do credit the fact that he was released from the physical act of writing by typing, but I scribed for him for a long time. Even in the area of math. So I actually have 2 kids who are dyslexic. And so when the math problem was write the number out, like EIGHT, like that's not math, that's English. We can skip that one. You can write this 8. You don't have to write out the word 8. So we would just skip those parts. And then for science, the science activity sheets, if it was like a matching or like color the rainbow or you know, pick A, B, or C, then they would do it. But if it's describe the water, you know, the, what's it called? The water process. What's it called?
Cycle.
Thank you. The water cycle. Just, you know, describe the water cycle. Well, we did that out loud. Like they would describe it to me and I'd be like, yep, that's right. Oh, but what about this step? Okay. And then I would say, put a check mark. So on their paper, they would just put a check because we discussed it, they did it, but I didn't require them to write it. Because what's the objective? The objective is, does he know the water cycle? It's not, can you write out a paragraph description? Because that's a different learning objective. It's not writing. I want him to know the science. I don't care about the writing. We do writing during writing time. And so when we would do writing, whether it was Copywork or whether it was the handwriting workbook or whether it was, you know, the creative writing assignment that I did want him to write this week, I would say, today you have to give me your best work. And he could do it. He would concentrate and actually do it. So.
I was going to say a lot of times when you're writing the water cycle in school, it's because the teacher has to make sure 30 kids understand the water cycle.
Right.
You can just have that conversation with them
Yes.
and learn that he knows it.
Right. That's why with Sunlight, we don't have a lot of tests because it's a conversation. I'm asking him, hey, describe me the water cycle. He describes it. Great, move on. I don't have to do a test. You just showed me that you know the water cycle. Yes. Absolutely.
My son loves the hands-on history stuff. He will learn about history better that way than his read alouds, because his read aloud, or not read alouds, his readers, he doesn't like reading. So as long as I'm reading to him, he does okay. But anyway, hands-on history is a good little tactical, multisensory way to learn too.
Yes.
Okay, so any other advice or suggestions, anything else, any stories, anything that you guys want to throw out about learning challenges here?
Well, I think, again, just learning your child. I have one child that loves all the noise. And so if it's quiet, she can't do anything. And her sister, if you breathe too loudly, woe be it to you. So we adjust. The one that needs a little background music or something happening, she did school one place. The one who needed complete silence, she worked in a different place, or put on the noise canceling headphones or whatnot. So I think, again, it's just that trial and error, not being afraid to try something. I think a lot of times as parents, we don't want our children to see us fail. I would believe the opposite. I think that's one of the true blessings of homeschool, is that your children are with you all the time and they see that you fail. But more importantly, they see how you handle failure. And so we try something, and again, we're a team. That did not work. So, you know, we can cry about it for 24 hours. If we have a success, we can celebrate for 24 hours. But after that, we've just got to get back to work, and we're going to try something new and see how that works out.
That's a great point, Lisa. When we had started doing handwriting with the oldest child, because, you know, he's the guinea pig, this is how you learn. We had started with a reason for handwriting. That was one of the 3 options that Sunlight offered. And I think back then they didn't even offer 3, they only had 2. And it was the most traditional looking one. It was the one that I liked, that I was familiar with. So I wanted my child to write like I did. And so we started with that. And again, this is the child who struggled with writing. So by the time we hit cursive in 3rd grade, it could have been the transitional year in 2nd grade, but somewhere around there, he really, like, first of all, he couldn't get the writing small enough, like for the lines. Like, he was writing really big still. And then his cursive did not slant. Like, the traditional cursive is supposed to be on a slant, and his was up and down. And he just really, really struggled. So I was like, all right, you know what? Let's give this other handwriting. It looks weird. It's a little bit strange, but let's give this other handwriting a try, and we'll just try it. And so we tried handwriting without tears. And lo and behold, so much better. Now, does he write in cursive now? He's 25. Does he write in cursive now? No. Can he sign his name? Yes. Can he read his grandmother's handwriting? Kind of. But you know, I was like, we tried this for 3 years. It didn't work. I mean, it worked okay. He learned how to write, but it wasn't great. So we pivoted. We tried something else and it worked better. Had it not worked, would I have looked for something else? Possibly. What would I have done? I would have asked all my moms that I know, all my homeschooling mamas, what are you using? What are you using? What are you using? And then what do you like about it? You know, all the pros and cons. And then I might have tried something else. But if it was good enough, fine. You know, he's a boy. Boys don't write in cursive. Not much.
And I think it's very important, like we mentioned already, to realize that you don't have to travel this journey alone. And maybe you have a good support group of homeschool mamas like Sheila had. Maybe you live somewhere where that's just not an option for you. And so certainly the Teachers Connection group or Sunlight's Connections Facebook group is available for you to be able to find community there and find encouragement there and find somebody to come alongside and pray with you about it. I had a homeschooling mentor, a mom friend who was X number of years ahead of me down the road. And I picked her brain and we shared prayer requests. And I think the thing that encouraged me most was to realize that here I was, this needy new homeschooling mom, and she was always answering questions and praying. And yet she was just as encouraged and just as blessed when I would pray for her. Because just because she was that much further down the road didn't mean she had it all figured out or all conquered or that her children were perfect at their homeschooling endeavors. And so I think finding someone that you can share that journey with is a blessing.
Amen to that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, ladies, so much for joining today to learn about learning challenges. And I invite you to ask any questions in the comments below, and one of us or any of the other mentors can help answer them. So thank you so much for joining. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.